Welcome to Sherlock Shadow Channel, where every story hides a secret. Grab your coffee, sit back, and dive into a world of twists and turns. Tell us where you're watching from. Drop your city and country in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share the thrill with fellow mystery lovers. Let the adventure begin. Hercule Poirot and the Affair of the Whispered Address. Chapter 1. The Whispered Invitation. The grand drawing-room of Lady Ellingham's Mayfair townhouse was a study in polished elegance, pale silk damask walls, ivory marble mantelpiece crowned with porcelain vases, and French windows overlooking a moonlit garden. Yet this serene atmosphere could not mask the tremor of unease that fluttered through the assembled guests. A single candle flickered on a side table, its wavering glow casting long shadows that danced across anxious faces. "I do not like it, Hastings," whispered Captain Arthur Hastings, perched on a velvet settee beside me. He tilted his head toward the door, as though expecting some ominous figure to burst in at any moment. Lady Ellingham's invitations are usually quite cheerful. This one seemed fraught with urgency. I nodded, adjusting the lapel of my tailcoat. My moustache was immaculate, each hair precisely in place, but even I felt a stir of something akin to apprehension. Indeed, Hastings, there is a certain cadence in the wording, a matter of the utmost discretion, which suggests more than mere family scandal, I replied, folding my hands upon my cane. We had not come for the annual summer soiree, but in response to an unsigned letter delivered to our residence only 3 nights ago. It spoke of a crisis so delicate that the writer trusted no one but Hercule Poirot to unravel it. Naturally, I insisted that Hastings accompany me, if only to steady my nerves, for I am but human, after all. The door opened at that moment, and Lady Ellingham swept in, resplendent in a gown of midnight blue velvet, yet her pale face betrayed the strain she tried so valiantly to conceal. Behind her stood her husband, Sir Reginald Ellingham, a portly man with a bristling white moustache and a proud bearing. They exchanged curt nods with each of us before Lady Ellingham's voice, soft yet quivering, broke the silence. "Thank you both for coming at such short notice," she began. "Hercule, I trust you understand the delicacy of our situation." She paused, glancing at Sir Reginald, whose expression hardened. "It involves my sister, the Honourable Miss Beatrice Montague." A rustle of surprise went round the room. Beatrice Montague, reputed for her charitable endeavours and genteel demeanour, was universally beloved. Her name rang in philanthropic circles from Edinburgh to Canterbury. Yet here she was, at the centre of Lady Ellingham's distress. Sir Reginald cleared his throat. "It seems a most peculiar affair. Beatrice received, or so she claims, a message yesterday afternoon, a seemingly innocuous line whispered through the keyhole of her boudoir door. And now she has vanished." "Vanished?" echoed Hastings, rising in his seat. "Surely not without a word, a note, anything?" Lady Ellingham shook her head, tears glistening. Her maid, Miss Caldwell, heard faint breathing behind the door, but when she opened it, the room was empty. Beatrice's desk was neat, her handbag was gone, and outside the window we found footprints leading into the garden, but they stopped abruptly at the pond. I raised an eyebrow. "Footprints on soft grass seldom cease without rhyme or reason, madame. Either they were interrupted or deliberately obscured." I glanced at the polished parquet floor beneath the window, noting smudges of mud that led away from the sill. "Tell me, was there any sound, any voice, besides that faint whisper?" Lady Ellingham bit her lip. Only the final word, "come." It was so clear, so urgent. mumbling at first, but then pronounced as though spoken by someone standing close at hand. A hush fell as each guest contemplated the scene. Among them were Master Julian Ellingham, the couple's impetuous son, his dark eyes wide with imagined visions of treachery; Mrs. Groves, the housekeeper, whose steel-grey hair and stern posture suggested a lifetime of secrets; and Dr. Penrose, the local physician, who observed us with quiet curiosity, as though the affair were a case study rather than a family tragedy. I seated myself at the small round table where the maid's key had been laid out, examining it as one might a curious relic. "The key bears no unusual mark," I observed, passing it to Hastings. "Yet the whisper came through its aperture. Curious indeed." Hastings frowned. Would the acoustics of a keyhole allow for such clarity? I thought the sound would be muffled, distorted. "Generally so," I admitted, "which suggests that the voice was deliberately near, perhaps speaking through a tube or from within the room itself, to confuse the listener." Lady Ellingham's eyes widened. "You mean an accomplice is hiding within my sister's very walls?" "Possibly," I said. "Or someone knows her habits so well that he could conceal himself until Miss Montague entered her room, then spring this invitation." I leaned back, tapping my fingers thoughtfully upon the table. The drawing room was hushed, the candles sputtering in the still air. Each suspect, I realized, possessed motive, ambition, jealousy, loyalty. Yet the greatest motive of all, I sensed, lay hidden in the whispered address itself. "Madame," I said, rising and smoothing my coat, "provide me with a list of those who knew of your sister's daily routines. Tonight, I shall use my little grey cells to untangle this most curious invitation. Come what may, Miss Beatrice Montague shall be found." A collective breath was released, and the candle's flame steadied. Outside, the summer night lay serene, as though nothing amiss had stirred below. Yet in that hush, I, Hercule Poirot, perceived the first murmur of a crime that would test the very limits of reason and human guile. Chapter 2. The Gathering of Suspects. Captain Hastings and I returned to Lady Ellingham's drawing-room early the following morning. The heavy drapes were drawn against the dawn, and a faint chill lingered in the air, as though the house itself mourned Beatrice Montague's disappearance. The mahogany table had been cleared of tea and pastries, replaced by a neat arrangement of chairs forming a semicircle. Each seat bore the name of a guest on a slender card: Miss Caldwell, the devoted maid; Master Julian, the Ellingham's son; Mrs. Groves, the housekeeper; Dr. Penrose, the family physician; Lady Ellingham herself; and Sir Reginald, rigid with paternal concern. The first to arrive was Miss Caldwell. She entered with hesitant steps, her apron pristine, her eyes red-rimmed. I watched her pat her pocket, as if seeking reassurance. "Hercule," she said in a trembling voice, "I cannot bear this any longer. I heard her voice so clearly, so close. I thought I saw a shadow slipping under the door." She pressed her hands together. "Please, find her soon." I nodded gently, laying a hand on her shoulder. "Madame, your courage in coming forward is commendable. Pray sit, and tell me exactly what you observed last evening." Miss Caldwell took a seat and described the moment again. The muted knock, the whisper of Beatrice's name, the soft click of the latch. Then silence. She admitted she waited only seconds before entering, fearful of alarming her mistress unduly. But I detected something more. Guilt, perhaps, at not lingering longer to listen. I made a mental note to inspect her quarters later. Next came Master Julian, his youthful eagerness barely tempered by worry. He spoke rapidly, hands gesturing, dark hair falling into his eyes. I've searched the stables, the coach house, the gardener's hut. Nothing. I'd follow the footprints myself, but father forbade me. He glanced nervously at Sir Reginald, who stood by the window, arms folded. I swear, Poirot, if I were older, I would go looking for her myself. She wouldn't leave voluntarily. Beatrice would never desert us. Julian's fervour suggested genuine affection, but also a streak of recklessness. I filed away his information, footprints that led into the garden, but ended at the pond. The boy seemed to resent restraint, eager to act before logic prevailed. Mrs. Groves arrived next, her stern visage softened by grief. "I've served this family for 20 years, she declared. "I know every secret passage and alcove in this house. If someone wanted to hide here, they would have done so by now." She tapped her cane. "Yet I have not found a single trace. No discarded glove, no footprints inside, no misplaced object. It is as though the earth swallowed her whole." Her confidence struck me as curious. A housekeeper so certain of her domain might overlook subtle concealments, loose panels, hidden cupboards. I resolved to question her further about the house's architecture. Dr. Penrose entered quietly, examining the assembled faces. "I have nothing medical to report," he said, offering a small bow. Beatrice was of excellent health, no sign of duress on her belongings. However, I noted a faint aroma on the windowsill, anise perhaps, or some perfumed tincture, unusual in May. He sniffed the air as though to recapture the scent. If someone intended to obfuscate, they might have used a scent to mask their own presence. Anise. A single word, yet significant. Perfumed oils were often employed by women, but a stranger could have carried a vial. I filed this clue alongside Miss Caldwell's guilt and Julian's impulsiveness. Lady Ellingham and Sir Reginald remained standing, observing my scrutiny of their household. Lady Ellingham's composure had regained its veneer of calm. "I believe each of you has spoken truthfully," I said, turning to face the circle. "Yet truth can conceal as much as it reveals. I must ask more pointed questions." I paused, letting the weight of my gaze settle upon each suspect in turn. "Miss Caldwell, did you notice any letters, parcels, or visitors delivered to Miss Montague within the past week?" She hesitated, then admitted a small parcel had arrived, sealed in plain brown paper bearing no return address. Miss Beatrice dismissed it immediately, but that parcel may have contained instructions. Parcel or letter, the whisper could have emanated from within. I then addressed Master Julian. "You say you searched the grounds. Did you venture beyond the formal gardens?" He flushed. "Only the edge of the orchard," he confessed. "I thought to look by the riverbank, but I froze." Fear again. Youthful bravery wedded to apprehension. Perhaps he had more to hide. Mrs. Groves, I observed, tapped her cane in impatience. "You know this house better than anyone, madame. Could a person disappear without your knowledge?" She met my eyes steadily. "Only if they were part of this household for some time," she replied. Subtle deflection. A seasoned servant might claim omniscience to cover small omissions. Finally, Dr. Penrose. "You noted a scent of anise. Did you smell this anywhere else in the house?" He pursed his lips. "No, only in Miss Montague's boudoir. I lingered by the window, hoping to detect more." I nodded approvingly. "Then perhaps you could accompany me later to inspect her room in detail." Silence followed. Each suspect had contributed a piece of the puzzle: parcel, scent, footprints, sudden fear. But none had yet stepped beyond a facade of innocence. The stage was set. Motives simmered beneath polished manners. Secrets lurked behind polite phrases. As I rose from the circle, I addressed them in my most deliberate tone. Until I have examined every detail, from parcel to perfume, from servant's remorse to boy's bravado, you must remain available. I shall speak with each of you again in private to uncover contradictions. I inclined my head. For now, reflect upon what you have said and what you have omitted. The truth lies in the interstices, not in spoken words alone. As the suspects dispersed, some with relief, others with reluctance, I exchanged a glance with Hastings. He nodded, understanding the design unfolding. "Poirot," he whispered, "we have our gallery of characters. But where is the painter's brush?" I tapped my chin. "Patience, Hastings. The brush is loaded. It needs only the right stroke. And that stroke, I believe, shall come from the whispered address itself." With that, I swept from the room, determined to pursue the hidden corridors of motive and deception until Miss Beatrice Montague was brought home. Chapter 3. Initial Interviews. I summoned Miss Caldwell to the library first, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes and its heavy curtains drawn to mute the morning light. The maid entered, carrying herself with a nervous deference. I offered a small smile. "Madame Caldwell, I wish to understand your motions more precisely. You heard the whisper through the keyhole, yes?" She nodded, seating herself on a velvet armchair. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. I was delivering Miss Montague's evening tea tray. I tapped lightly, in case she was occupied. Then I heard her name, spoken close to my ear." She swallowed. It said, "Beatrice." "Très bien," I said. "And when you opened the door, there was no one. Did you inspect the room more carefully?" "I looked everywhere, but I was afraid. I thought the intruder might still be there." I leaned forward. "Fear can sharpen or dull the senses. Tell me, madame, did anything appear out of place on the tray?" She hesitated. "Now that you mention it, the silver spoon lay reversed, its handle pointing inward toward the teapot, rather than outward. A tiny detail, but a telling one. I made a mental note. Reversed spoon, symbolic maybe, or an unconscious signal left by Miss Montague herself. Next, I called in Lady Ellingham. She entered with quiet dignity, though her eyes betrayed residual anxiety. I gestured to a small writing desk in the corner. "Madame, I see here your sister's letters. May I ask about her correspondence?" Lady Ellingham cleared her throat. Beatrice had only a few correspondents, her charity sponsors, her bankers, and one friend, Miss Teresa Grant. None of them would send anything unusual. Yet a plain parcel arrived this week, I reminded her. Brown paper, no return address. Did Beatrice mention its contents? "She refused to open it," Lady Ellingham admitted. "She seemed unsettled by its weight." I tapped the desk. Weight, yes. And after receiving it, she spent an unusual length of time alone in the conservatory, inhaling the scent of orange blossoms. Might someone have observed her there? Lady Ellingham shook her head. Only Sir Reginald, when he came to fetch her for supper. I dismissed her with a nod and beckoned her husband in. Sir Reginald Ellingham, stern as ever, took the chair opposite me. I studied his posture. Rigid back, tightly clasped hands. "Sir Reginald, your son Julian tells me he searched the coach house and gardener's hut. Might you have observed anyone else wandering the grounds?" Sir Reginald's lips thinned. "The gardener, Mr. Collins, reported nothing. Our estate is large, but well patrolled. I trust my staff implicitly. Yet the footprints ended at the pond, I pressed. Are there hidden paths beyond that point? He frowned. Only the narrow footbridge over the stream, near the orchard, too unstable for most. Julian feared to cross it. I inclined my head. Fear is instructive, but I shall examine that bridge myself. After dismissing Sir Reginald, I invited Mrs. Groves, the housekeeper, to join me in the morning room. She arrived with the dignity of long service. I asked, "Madame, you know this house as well as I know my moustache. Did you notice any new creaks or draughty panels in Miss Montague's suite?" She tapped her cane. "None that I recall. But I did replace a loose hinge on the linen cupboard yesterday. Someone may have concealed themselves inside." I steepled my fingers. A very good observation. I shall inspect that cupboard presently. Now tell me about the key itself. You manage the keys to every room. Did you notice any mark on hers? She frowned. No mark, but I did find her original key, a small silver trinket key, missing from the ring. My eyes brightened. A second key, then. Perhaps the one used to unlock her door from the inside. Mrs. Groves stood abruptly. "I will fetch it at once." Before she could leave, I waved a hand. "No, madame. Let us preserve its position. I will search later with Mr. Penrose." I then spoke with Captain Hastings in private, sharing my suspicions. He agreed to accompany me to the Orchard Bridge and inspect the footbridge's timbers. Lastly, I called Doctor Penrose to the boudoir itself. The anise scent lingered faintly, though fresh air now entered through the open window. I asked him to demonstrate where he smelled it strongest. As he leaned toward the dressing table, I noted a tiny violet stain on the lace handkerchief he carried. "Doctor Penrose," I said, "where does this handkerchief come from?" He paled. "My mother's. I inherited it." "Anise tincture is sometimes used to scent handkerchiefs," I observed. "Perhaps the scent on the sill is connected to your mother's recipe?" He coughed. "It is possible, Monsieur Poirot, though I did not apply any this week." I inclined my head. "Interesting. We shall test later." Thus concluded my initial interviews. Each suspect had revealed a fragment: reversed spoon, secret parcel, silver key, violet stain. Yet the central mystery, who uttered the whisper and who directed Miss Montague away, remained hidden. As I reassembled with Hastings, I murmured, "The stage is set, mon ami. But the first false lead approaches. We must tread carefully, for one among them crafts the deception at every step." Chapter 4. The First False Lead. Late that afternoon, I resolved to recreate the circumstances of the whispered summons. Alone in Miss Montague's boudoir, I closed the shutters and retreated behind the linen cupboard door, leaving the key in the lock. The air was heavy with the faint scent of orange blossom and anise, a duality I still found perplexing. Once concealed, I leaned close to the keyhole and cleared my throat quietly, mimicking the very whisper that had lured Beatrice away. Beatrice. The word escaped my lips in a soft murmur, resonant enough to carry through the aperture. Moments later, I heard hurried footsteps approach, distinct, deliberate, and not those of a terrified maid. The door swung open, and Miss Caldwell entered, her face paling at the sight of me emerging from the darkness. "Monsieur Poirot!" she cried, stumbling backward, her apron fluttering like a startled bird. In her hand was the plain brown parcel, now unwrapped, its papers strewn across the carpet. A small notebook peeked from within, its cover embellished with crimson ink, I held up a finger. "Madame, sit," I commanded gently. "Explain to me why you steal into this room, parcel in hand." She sank to the chaise longue, hands trembling around the notebook. I meant no harm, Monsieur Poirot. It was Beatrice's gift to me, a diary she kept for years. She entrusted it to me for safekeeping, fearing someone might read it. Her voice cracked. "I was about to return it to her this evening, when I heard your voice." I studied her closely. Was this genuine distress, or expertly feigned? The parcel's brown paper matched the one delivered last week. Inside, however, lay only diaries, not instructions or threats. Yet the discovery of the notebook here, combined with my simulated whisper, painted a damning picture. Miss Caldwell possessed the key motive, the key means, and the key opportunity. I summoned Sir Reginald and Mrs. Groves to witness. The housekeeper glowered, while Sir Reginald folded his arms triumphantly. "So the maid deceives us all," he declared. "She sought to manipulate poor Beatrice with secrets stolen from her own sister." Mrs. Groves nodded grimly. I always suspected her loyalty was feigned. Sir Reginald stepped forward and seized the parcel. Inside the torn papers, he found only the binding of the diary and a small folded letter in Beatrice's handwriting. He unfolded it with a flourish, expecting some confession of guilt, only to read, "My dearest Clara, keep this diary safe. Should the worst befall me, you alone must know my thoughts." They passed the note among themselves, astonished. A diary, not a ransom note. I allowed the constable I had summoned to place Miss Caldwell under arrest for further questioning. She offered no resistance, her shoulders sagging like a wilting flower. Yet, as the door closed behind her, I perceived in her demeanour not the air of a hardened culprit, but that of a victim stricken by grief. As they led her away, Sir Reginald beamed. "The case is solved, Hercule. My sister's maid has lured her into hiding or worse, and we shall extract the truth from her now." But I, standing amid the discarded papers and the lingering scents, felt no such certainty. I allowed them to depart and remained alone, pacing the chamber. The very ease with which I had ensnared Miss Caldwell suggested an artificial trap. No true culprit yields so readily under the first question. I knelt by the fallen papers and retrieved the little notebook. Its crimson binding bore the initials B.M. inside, confirming its ownership. Yet why would a maid hide it here, risking discovery? And why entrust it to the maid at all, if Beatrice feared for her safety? My glance fell upon the lace handkerchief Dr. Penrose had used, now pressed into the maid's trembling palm during her arrest. A faint violet stain, similar to the one I had earlier observed, marked its corner. Had the doctor planted it, or was this another diversion? I traced my finger along the hem of the carpet where Miss Caldwell had knelt. Just there the threads were caught, pulled slightly. Perhaps the residue of a struggle, perhaps only wear. But Poirot's little grey cells noted the anomaly. Rising, I crossed to the window and threw it open. Fresh garden air rushed in, carrying the faintest echo of children's laughter from beyond the hedges. The false conviction of the household, the gardener's complacency, the maid's arrest, all were convenient, but insufficiently intricate for a crime requiring superior cunning. I closed the window and extinguished the lamp. When Sir Reginald and Mrs. Groves returned triumphantly to check on progress, I greeted them with a measured smile. "Gentlefolk," I said, "you have performed admirably in revealing Miss Caldwell's secret, but let us not mistake personal loyalty for culpability. Emotional bonds can prompt strange acts of concealment, yet concealment alone is not crime. Sir Reginald's brow furrowed. Then who is guilty? I inclined my head. Not yet revealed. The first false lead has served its purpose, to draw out those who would leap to judgment. Now we must turn to less obvious avenues. I shall next examine the orchard footbridge and the linen cupboard hinge. These, I suspect, will yield truths Miss Caldwell's diary could not. As they departed, confidence restored, I lingered by the empty cupboard. Within its dark recess, the whisper still seemed to echo, and I, Hercule Poirot, would decipher its source before another innocent soul was unduly accused. Chapter 4. The First False Lead. Late that afternoon, I returned to Miss Montague's boudoir alone, resolved to recreate the circumstances of the whisper. I closed the shutters against the dying light and slipped behind the linen cupboard, leaving the key in the lock. The air was redolent with the mingled scents of orange blossom and anise, a perplexing combination I had yet to unravel. Peering through the keyhole, I cleared my throat and spoke in a hushed tone. "Beatrice!" Almost immediately, hurried footsteps approached. The door swung open to reveal Miss Caldwell, her face ashen, clutching the plain brown parcel. In an instant, my trap had snapped. "Monsieur Poirot!" she gasped, dropping the package as she stumbled back. I emerged calmly, raising an admonishing finger. "Madame Caldwell, explain why you lurk here, parcel in hand." Her hands shook as she sank onto the chaise longue. I meant only to return my mistress's diary. Beatrice entrusted it to me for safekeeping, fearing someone would steal her thoughts." She waved the parcel. "This is hers, nothing more." I allowed Sir Reginald and Mrs. Groves, summoned moments earlier, to witness the scene. Sir Reginald's satisfaction was plain as he marched forward. "So you lured my sister away to conceal her own diary," he declared. Mrs. Groves nodded, her grey eyes steely. "Deceit is in her heart. I always suspected." They pried open the package, expecting blackmail or threats. Instead, they found a neatly bound journal stamped BM inside, which lay only Beatrice's private reflections and a folded note. "Clara, keep this safe. If misfortune comes, you must guard my words." Sir Reginald scowled, but I observed Miss Caldwell's distress, not guilt. As constables moved to arrest her for obstructing the investigation, I made a small gesture. "On the contrary, we shall hold her for questioning, but suspicion alone is insufficient." Once the door closed, I examined the carpet where she had knelt. A slight abrasion caught my eye, threads pulled, evidence of a struggle, however mild. And in her palm glinted a small violet stain, matching the tincture scent Dr. Penrose had carried. Had she smeared it on her handkerchief, then feigned shock? Or was she framed? I retrieved the diary and note, noting their undisturbed condition. A true culprit might destroy private papers. A protective friend would preserve them. Miss Caldwell's willingness to hide these volumes spoke more of loyalty than of conspiracy. Turning, I confronted Sir Reginald and Mrs. Groves as they returned. "You see before you not a perpetrator, but an unwitting participant in a ruse. The false lead has served its purpose, to draw out those eager for swift judgment." Sir Reginald bristled. "Then who is the culprit, Poirot?" I inclined my head. "Not yet revealed. We must pursue subtler clues, the orchard footbridge, the missing silver key, and the curious hinge on the linen cupboard." As they departed, convinced the maid's betrayal was exposed, I allowed the tense hush to linger. Alone once more, I pressed my palm to the cupboard door, whispering, "Monsieur, As you see, the first trap has caught only shadows. Now we turn our little grey cells toward the hidden doorways of motive and deceit. With that, I departed the boudoir, resolved that the next lead would be as meticulous and cunning as the one that had nearly misled us all. Chapter 5. The Psychological Game. That evening, I invited the remaining household members to join me in the conservatory under the pretense of reviewing botanical specimens. The glass dome glowed softly with the lamps within, and trailing jasmine vines perfumed the air. Captain Hastings and I stood by a wrought-iron table set with tea, but my gaze was fixed upon my unsuspecting audience. Lady Ellingham, Sir Reginald, Master Julian, and Dr. Penrose. "Mes amis," I began, pouring Earl Grey with deliberate precision, "in this exquisite setting, we shall proceed not with questions, but with demonstration. Observe, if you will, the behavior of water upon different surfaces." I lifted a silver teapot and tilted it over a series of leaves arranged on the table. Tiny rivulets curved and separated, their movements guided by contours invisible to the naked eye. I paused, allowing their curiosity to simmer. Just as water follows hidden channels, so does truth slip along concealed pathways. One must merely present the right stimulus to reveal those channels. I turned to Lady Ellingham, offering her a cup. "Madame, you possess an intimate knowledge of your sister's routines. Yet when the parcel arrived last week, you suggested Miss Montague dismissed it lightly. How did you know to retrieve it immediately from the Morning Post?" Her hand trembled slightly as she accepted the cup. I passed the post-room on my way from a calligraphy lesson," she stammered. "Mrs. Groves informed me she had set it aside." "Perhaps," I said softly. "Or perhaps you ensured it reached your desk before anyone else noticed." Her composure fluttered, and she stared at the tea leaves swirling in her cup as though they bore hidden messages. Next, I addressed Master Julian. "My dear boy, you professed eagerness to search the riverbank yourself, yet froze at the orchard's edge. Tell me, why did you cross the footbridge alone last Tuesday night, when no one else was about?" His colour drained. "I wanted to fetch firewood," he mumbled. "The caretaker was ill, and Mother's supper lay cold." His voice cracked under my scrutiny. But the bridge bowed dangerously. I turned back. I inclined my head. "A noble motive. Yet you neglected to inform anyone of your excursion, did you not?" Julian swallowed. I feared you would scold me for disobedience. Or perhaps you feared someone might see you." I fixed him with a look so steady the boy glanced away. Then Dr. Penrose, calm and composed, met my gaze. "Doctor, you noted the anise scent in the boudoir and claimed it might derive from your family recipe. Yet when I later examined the laundry basket, I discovered fresh embroidery floss stained violet, identical to the tincture used in that scent. How did those threads come to rest among the linens?" Penrose's face paled. "I embroider for my sister," he confessed. "She requested a pattern of violets. I used perfume to scent the threads." His voice faltered. "I did not wish to alarm her." I nodded. "A plausible explanation, Doctor. Yet why choose an unusual scent when other perfumed oils were readily available?" He met my eyes, defiance tempered by unease. "Only because it reminded me of home." At that moment, Sir Reginald cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Poirot, you toy with shadows. If you have discovered so much, why allow these charades?" I turned to him. "Because, monsieur, those who believe themselves safe will reveal their true selves when they think the game is lost. Observe Lady Ellingham's retreat, Julian's hesitation, and the doctor's over-familiarity with scented threads. Each reaction is a thread in our tapestry. I raised my teacup in a mock salute. Tonight, mes amis, the psychological game begins in earnest. Continue your routines, conceal nothing, and let your actions speak when your words falter. Tomorrow, I shall summon you again, armed with new questions, and you will see how swiftly a carefully placed question can cause the most confident facade to crumble. With that, I allowed them to disperse, leaving Hastings and me alone amid the trailing vines and shattered pretense. Mon ami, I said, the board is set, and our players dance upon it. Soon, their own anxieties will betray the secret of the whispered address. Chapter 6. The Second Disappearance. The following morning, a tremor of alarm rippled through the household. Master Julian burst into the drawing room, pale and breathless, summoning us to the garden with frantic urgency. Hastings and I exchanged a quick glance before following him into the overgrown yew maze at the estate's edge. There, in the dew-spangled grass, lay the abandoned carriage lantern, its glass shattered, the oil slicked black upon the path. Hastings stooped to examine the fragments. "Someone gave chase last night," he murmured. "Look at these scuff marks. Boots, not slippers." I knelt beside him, noting a second clue. Drops of rich purple liquid staining the lantern's brass mount. "The same tincture, Hastings," I said quietly, recalling the violet perfume on Dr. Penrose's handkerchief. "Our doctor, perhaps, or another with access to his supplies." Julian led us further into the maze, voice quavering. She was here, but not Beatrice this time. Clara, our cousin, vanished from the rose arbor at dusk. She came seeking me, but found the lantern first, then nothing. "Another disappearance," I observed, standing. "An escalation designed to confound us." I examined the footpath. "Note how the tracks circle before cutting sharply toward the stream." I pointed. Someone intended the pursuit to look haphazard. Yet no one mistakes a crooked path for chance. This was deliberate misdirection. As we reached the rose arbor, its petals wilted under heavy dew, Lady Ellingham appeared with Sir Reginald and Dr. Penrose. Their faces were masks of shock. "My cousin Clara," Lady Ellingham whispered. "She was to arrive for tea last evening." Sir Reginald's face reddened. "This insolence cannot continue, Poirot. First Beatrice, now Clara. By dawn, half my family will be missing." I raised a calming hand. "Exaggeration serves no one, monsieur. But we must act swiftly. Hastings, return to the house and secure all entrances. No one in or out until I say." He nodded and departed. I then turned to Dr. Penrose. "Doctor, you had every opportunity to administer your violet-scented floss at supper, yet you remained in the laboratory until midnight, you said?" The doctor's jaw clenched. "My work required solitude," he replied. "Is that accusation or inquiry, Poirot?" "Merely observation," I said. "You have given us, and yourself, a clear time frame. Yet, the violet stain appears on more than your handiwork. It is found near the lantern, the linen cupboard, and now upon this arbor's bench." Dr. Penrose's calm cracked. He glanced at the twisted petals of a fallen rose. "I have no idea how it came to be here." "Then let us consider Miss Montague's diary," I suggested, retrieving it from my coat. She wrote of a clandestine meeting planned at midnight in the rose arbor. The night she vanished, she carried only a single rose in her hand. I opened the pages to a hastily scrawled entry. "If I am to meet my informant, It must be where roses shield us. Midnight, by the old arbour. Lady Ellingham gasped. My sister would never leave without telling me. Who could she have trusted so implicitly? Sir Reginald pounded his fist. This charade grows too elaborate. I nodded. Exactly. A second disappearance, identical in fashion, suggests the same mastermind, someone with knowledge of family secrets and the grounds. But why abduct Clara? She knows less of Beatrice's affairs. Lady Ellingham's face twisted with suspicion, perhaps to draw out the truth, force me to reveal what I hide. Or to lure me into a trap, I countered. In any case, we must not chase shadows alone. I turned to Sir Reginald. Secure your family in the house. Send a runner to Inspector Japp. I will descend into the labyrinth to uncover the path our culprit has left behind. Reluctantly, the Ellinghams obeyed, retreating through the maze toward the main drive. I paused at the arbour's entrance, pressing a gloved hand against the gnarled wood. The scent of violet and rose entwined in the night air. Beneath the petals lay a smear of mud, and a single footprint set too close to the flower bed to be accidental. I knelt, measuring the print's length. Size 9, brogue heel, the right foot, I observed. Not Julian's slender foot, nor Caldwell's neat slipper. A man's shoe, likely new. I stood, glancing back to ensure no one watched me. This crime demands not only little grey cells, but absolute discretion. Hastings, I called as he returned with the constable. Bring torches and lock the maze gates. No sound, no disturbance. Tomorrow we resume the hunt by daylight, with measured steps and hearts unclouded by panic. As the lanterns flickered to life, casting long shadows among the hedges, I whispered to the roses overhead. Whoever plays this game thinks themselves beyond suspicion. Now, mon ami, we will tighten our circle, leave no path unexplored, no secret unturned, until both ladies are safe in our hands. Chapter 7. The Secret in the Moonlit Library. Late that night, unable to rest, I returned alone to the manor's vast library, the lofty shelves looming like silent sentinels. A single lamp burned at the far end, casting a pool of light upon an ancient oak desk. The mahogany floor was carpeted in deep red, muffling my footsteps as I approached. I intended to examine the desk drawers where Beatrice's confidential papers might have been hidden and where Clara's note could yet lie. As I stepped across the threshold, I noticed the desk's central drawer stood ajar, its lock broken. My heart quickened. Carefully, I drew back the lamp's shade, illuminating the contents. Books strewn across the surface, vellum manuscripts torn and scattered, and at the center, a pale sheet of paper stained with coffee rings. I knelt, gingerly lifting it with gloved fingertips. The handwriting was unmistakably Beatrice's, an address written and rewritten in haste. Meet me at midnight, under the portrait of Lady Ravenhurst, in the heart of this very library. I paused, recalling the grand oil painting of Lady Ravenhurst that hung above the fireplace, her stern gaze following every movement in the room. The revelation struck me. The whispered summons, the midnight rendezvous in the rose arbour, both lures. But this was different. Beatrice had left precise instructions, not carried away by fear, but by deliberation. Someone coaxed her with an address only she would recognize, hidden beneath family legend. My fingers brushed against another fragment, a torn corner of parchment, on which was sketched the library's floor plan, a secret corridor marked in crimson ink. I traced the line. From behind the portrait's panel, along a narrow passage leading beneath the servants' wing. Beneath my eyes, the puzzle pieces began to align. I tapped my cane quietly, beckoning Hastings and the constable, who had maintained watch below. Within moments, they stood beside me, their faces grave in the dim lamplight. I handed the note to Hastings. "Observe," I said, pointing to the cryptic floor plan. Miss Montague knew of this hidden passage. She planned to meet someone secreted behind the portrait. But who? Hastings examined the corridor's route. "This leads toward the linen cupboard in the boudoir, the very spot you first trapped Miss Caldwell." He frowned. Could the maid have known of this passage? "Unlikely," I replied. "A servant might learn of concealed corridors, but only over years, not in a single night. No, this knowledge belongs to someone intimately acquainted with the house's secret histories." The constable stepped forward. "Shall we explore it, Monsieur Poirot?" I nodded, motioning to the portrait. Gently, I pressed the gilded frame, and with a soft click, the panel swung inward, revealing a narrow, dust-laden corridor. The lamp's glow did not penetrate its darkness. I produced a small lantern from my coat and entered first, Hastings close behind. The walls were lined with old brick, their mortar crumbling, and the air smelled of damp stone and mothballs. As we proceeded, I whispered to Hastings, "Note the echo of our footsteps. Such corridors rarely run straight. They twist to confound intruders. This was built for secrecy, not sanctuary." We rounded a bend and emerged behind the bay window of the library's alcove, scarcely 20 feet from our starting point, but hidden entirely. In the alcove lay a toppled chair and the shattered remains of a porcelain vase, its water staining the carpet. A quick glance revealed footprints in the spilled water, slender, shoeless prints, the arc of a bare heel. Hastings knelt. "Miss Montague's slipper," he said in hushed tones. "She was here." I studied the mark. "Yes, but note how it leads toward the main library, not away. She left her slipper deliberately, a breadcrumb to guide our eyes." I followed the prints back to the corridor entrance. On the threshold lay a single fluttering page from Miss Montague's diary, its final entry scrawled in trembling ink. "He awaits me in the darkness. I fear his patience is as endless as the night." The diary page trembled in the lantern's breeze. I slipped it into an envelope. "This," I said, "is no longer merely a disappearance. It is a challenge. Beatrice sought her confidant here, and by doing so, unearthed the corridor I suspect our perpetrator uses to move unseen." We retraced our steps to the library's main expanse, where the portrait stood silent witness. As we emerged, Dr. Penrose, summoned by the constable, approached with Lady Ellingham and Sir Reginald. Each face wore a mixture of relief and dread. I held the envelope aloft. Behold the second address, the true whispered invitation, not the rose arbor, but the moonlit library behind this very panel. I placed the diary page beside the broken drawer. Beatrice knew where to find him, and yet she vanished. Clara followed, compelled by sisterly concern. Both were lured. Lady Ellingham's eyes filled. Who would know of this passage? Who betrayed her trust? Sir Reginald sputtered. "Only someone who lived in these walls." I turned to Dr. Penrose, observing his agitation. "Doctor, you have confessed knowledge of bespoke corridors in your anatomical explorations of this house's walls, yet you claim ignorance of this route's origin?" The doctor swallowed. I have been here only a fortnight. How could I inclined my head. "Perhaps you consulted the estate's original plans. Perhaps you walked these halls by night, or perhaps someone guided you." At that moment, a faint rustle issued from the corridor behind the panel. We all shifted, tense. I set down the lantern. "Stay here," I whispered to Lady Ellingham, positioning Hastings at the panel. With a swift motion, I pressed the hidden latch and swung the portrait wide. Silence. Then, at the corridor's mouth, stood a solitary figure, silhouetted by the lantern's glow, slim, tall, cloaked in shadows. The candle flickered, revealing the sharp silhouette of a hat brim and a gloved hand clutching a crimson-stained letter. I stepped forward, heart steady. "Monsieur," I said in calmest tones, "you find yourself in a dangerous game. Yet at last we meet where the whispers began." The figure paused, then lowered the hat, revealing a pale face wrought with panic and recognition. The final act was at hand. Chapter 8. A Sinister Discovery. The corridor's hush was shattered by a soft cry, followed by the shuffle of hurried footsteps. The figure in the shadows recoiled, and I seized my lantern, advancing with deliberate calm. Hastings remained by the portrait, ready to secure our exit. As I stepped into the narrow passage, the walls pressed close, the air thick with damp and decay. Ahead, beyond a bend, a faint glow flickered. "Stay here, Hastings," I murmured, slipping past him into the passage. The glow grew brighter, a warming light, unnatural in this dismal place. I followed the flicker, heart poised, until I reached a heavy oak door set into the far wall. Its surface was scarred, the hinges rusted. Through its iron grille, I saw a small chamber illuminated by a single candle. I pressed my ear against the door and listened. A low moan, pain, fear, but unmistakable. I stepped back and called through the grille, "Madame?" Inside, a trembling voice answered, quivering, "Help me. It's Clara." My heart quickened. Pushing aside the lantern's beam, I tested the lock. It resisted, but with a firm twist from my cane's tip, it clicked open. The door swung inward with a groan, revealing cousin Clara Ellingham seated against the damp stone wall. Her dress was torn, and bruises darkened her wrists where coarse rope had cut into her skin. She shivered, huddled in a thin scarlet shawl. "Clara!" Lady Ellingham burst through the panel behind me, Sir Reginald at her heels, Dr. Penrose and the constable close behind. Hastings raised the lantern, illuminating the chamber's grim details. Oilcloth sacks piled in the corner, damp straw strewn across the floor, and a small crate overturned near Clara's feet. I knelt beside her, offering my hand. "Fear not. You are safe now." She pressed her gloved hand to my palm, tears streaking her pale cheeks. "He said he would return," she whimpered, "and that if I called out he would—" I placed a finger to her lips. "Shh. Tell me what you can." Her eyes fluttered closed as she drew a trembling breath. "My sister. She came here willingly." He guided her through the passage. I followed, worried, but he blocked me, bound me here, said he needed a hostage to ensure her compliance. She coughed, wincing at pain. I heard her voice, whispering in the library, then silence. I nodded, observing the bruises. "You are strong, mademoiselle. Now, who is he?" Clara's gaze flickered toward Dr. Penrose, standing stiffly by the door. "It was Dr. Penrose," she said in a tremor. He said he loved Beatrice, that she spurned him for another. He whispered to her through the keyhole, using anise scent to mask his presence. When she refused, he panicked and locked her here. But then she used her diary to lure him to the library, and I followed. A heavy silence fell. Dr. Penrose's face drained of colour, his lips parting as if to speak, then snapping shut. Sir Reginald's hand went to his daughter's shoulder, glaring at the doctor. Mrs. Groves appeared in the corridor's mouth, aghast, while Hastings exhaled loudly. I rose and faced Dr. Penrose, lantern in hand. "Monsieur," I said, voice measured, "your knowledge of this passage and your use of violet-scented floss were no accident. Your affectionate embroidery, your late-night presence in the laboratory woods, every clue pointed to you." Penrose's shoulders sagged. He lifted his hands, blood-streaked from where he had brushed against Clara's chains. "Yes, it was I," he confessed, voice hollow. "I loved her. I loved her so that when she dismissed me I could not bear her absence. The diary, the corridor, each was to draw her back to me." He looked at Clara, tears mingling with shame. "I never meant harm, only to make her listen." Lady Ellingham let out a strangled sob and sank to her knees by her daughter. Sir Reginald stood rigid, fury giving way to grief. The constable stepped forward and placed Dr. Penrose under arrest. I closed the chamber door behind us and escorted Clara into the library, where Hastings and I summoned hot water and blankets. I seated Lady Ellingham and Sir Reginald beside their daughter, allowing them a moment to embrace in relieved sobs. Once Clara was tended, I addressed the assembled household. "The villain is revealed," I announced. "Yet let us not forget that love twisted by obsession can become a deadly snare. Dr. Penrose's knowledge of this house's secrets and his intimate access to the family's trust enabled his scheme. He used the whispered address and hidden passage to prey upon gentle hearts." Sir Reginald's face was pale. "Poirot, how did we not suspect him sooner?" I inclined my head. "Because we looked for malice where there was only affection distorted. The parcel, the scent, the embroidery floss, all were symbols of his devotion, not of his guilt, until paired with darker motives." I turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, the strength with which you clung to your sister saved you both. Your bravery in tracing her path has restored them to safety." Clara managed a weak smile. I only wished to help. I placed a hand on Hastings's shoulder. "And now, Hastings, let us gather the evidence properly for the inspector's arrival at dawn." As the household exhaled in collective relief, the manor's walls seemed to sigh, the secret passage sealed once more. Outside, the first light of dawn crept through the windows, signaling that the night's terror had passed. Yet in the quiet aftermath, I pondered how slender the line between love and obsession might be, and how swiftly trust can become the perfect instrument of deceit. Chapter 9. Outcome and Justice. At dawn's first light, the manor courtyard was abuzz with official activity. Inspector Japp arrived from Scotland Yard, his expression grave yet respectful. He had been apprised of my findings by telegram the previous night, and he wasted no time in formalizing Dr. Penrose's arrest. The doctor, still pale from his confession, was led to the awaiting constables, his hands bound gently but firmly. He offered no resistance, only a broken apology whispered into the cold morning air. Hastings observed with a solemn nod, while Lady Ellingham and Sir Reginald stood nearby, their grief tempered by relief. Lady Ellingham approached me as the constables escorted Penrose away. "Monsieur Poirot, how can we ever thank you?" Her voice trembled, emotion raw. I inclined my head, my moustache quivering with empathy. "Madam, simply restoring your family to safety is reward enough. Yet I trust that justice, once served, will bring you peace." She pressed my hand, gratitude shining in her eyes. Behind her, Clara stood supported by Sir Reginald, still wrapped in blankets, her spirit recovering under the watchful care of devoted relatives. Inspector Japp paused at the steps, turning to me. Poirot, your methods remain as inscrutable as ever. Yet I must admit, they are effective. He tapped a folder of evidence, diary pages, floor plans, and the violet-stained handkerchief against his palm. I shall see that these are catalogued properly. The coroner will complete his report, and Penrose will face trial. I nodded, offering a small smile. Your diligence, Inspector, complements the little grey cells. Together, all aspects of the law are satisfied. Once the constables departed with their prisoner, the household began its return to routine. Mrs. Groves instructed the servants to clear away the makeshift infirmary in the library, while Miss Caldwell was released from temporary confinement, tears of regret and relief mingling on her cheeks. She approached me shyly. Monsieur Poirot, I am so sorry for the trouble I caused. I patted her hand gently. Madame, your loyalty to Miss Montague was admirable. You acted from affection, not malice. Let no remorse shadow your service here. In the drawing room, I gathered the remaining evidence on a small table. The torn diary pages, the crimson-bound notebook, and the battered carriage lantern. I inspected each item meticulously, ensuring every detail was recorded. Hastings observed me thoughtfully. You return to these fragments even now, Poirot? He inquired. I tapped a finger to my lips. The tale of a crime does not end with confession, Hastings. One must confirm that no loose thread remains, no secret passage overlooked, no misplaced clue unexamined. My gaze lingered on the final diary entry. He awaits me in the darkness. The sentiment echoed, haunting. I folded the page carefully and slid it into its envelope. This line reveals the depth of Miss Montague's resolve. She approached her captor willingly to protect her cousin, a testament to her courage. Hastings nodded. And a reminder, mon ami, that deception often hides beneath devotion. Lady Ellingham entered quietly, pausing at the threshold. Hercule, what shall we do now? She asked softly. I gestured to the console where the morning light fell upon a vase of fresh roses, Clara's favourite. Madame, you will restore your home to warmth and laughter. The roses will remind you of renewal, and you, Sir Reginald, will rebuild trust among your household. Sir Reginald, standing behind his wife, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Yes, he murmured, we will not allow this tragedy to define us. As I prepared to take my leave, Hastings and I stood in the hall by our coats. The staff gathered discreetly, offering silent bows of gratitude. The hush was respectful. The crisis had united them all in shared relief. I straightened my tie and turned to the Ellinghams once more. Madame, monsieur, continue your lives with confidence. And should any whisper of fear or suspicion arise, remember that a calm mind and observant eye will always prevail. Lady Ellingham curtsied, tears glimmering. Clara managed a small wave. Stepping into the cool morning air, Hastings at my side, I inhaled deeply. The case of the whispered address was concluded, yet its echoes would linger in memory. I squared my shoulders against the gentle breeze. On to the next adventure, Hastings, I said lightly. He smiled, relief evident in his eyes. Lead the way, Poirot. And so, with the little grey cells rested and the bonds of justice fulfilled, we departed Greystone Manor, our hearts lightened by the knowledge that even the darkest schemes cannot withstand the illumination of reason. Chapter 10. The Departure. The sun had fully claimed the sky when Captain Hastings and I stepped once more onto the gravel drive of Greystone Manor. Our carriage awaited, its coachman standing at respectful attention. A soft breeze carried the scent of rose and jasmine from the gardens, now tranquil once more. As we prepared to depart, Lady Ellingham emerged onto the portico, her bearing composed yet tinged with lingering sorrow. Sir Reginald and Clara stood slightly behind her, the morning's trials having drawn them closer in quiet solidarity. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Ellingham began, her voice gentle yet steady, "words cannot express our gratitude. You restored what was most precious to us, our family's safety and trust." I inclined my head, tapping my cane lightly upon the gravel. "Madame, it was your own courage and the little grey cells that guided me. I merely illuminated the hidden paths." I offered a small, characteristic smile. "Now, I take my leave, trusting that Greystone's walls will remain silent guardians rather than prison bars." Clara stepped forward, her shawl wrapped neatly about her shoulders. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft yet clear. "You reminded us that even whispers can carry the weight of danger and the promise of hope." She paused, brushing a loose tendril of hair from her face. "I shall not forget it." Sir Reginald, ever reserved, extended a firm hand. "Your discretion and skill were beyond question, Poirot. If ever you journey this way again, know that you will always be welcome, as a family friend, not merely a detective." I accepted his hand with formal courtesy. "It would give me great pleasure, monsieur, and should you ever require assistance, however subtle, my services remain at your disposal." With final bows and farewells, Hastings and I boarded the carriage. The coachman cracked the reins, and the horses moved forward, their hooves crunching the gravel in measured rhythm. As Greystone Manor receded into the distance, I leaned forward to Hastings, peering through the window at the stately facade now bathed in golden light. "Mon ami," I murmured, "another case closes, and yet the echoes remain." We witnessed how devotion, when twisted by jealousy and fear, can become as potent as any physical weapon. But we also saw courage, Clara's bravery, Lady Ellingham's steadfastness, and even Miss Caldwell's loyalty. Hastings nodded, gazing back at the fading silhouette of the manor. "Indeed, Poirot, it was a tapestry of human emotion, love, obsession, duty, all woven into a single perilous design. Your deductions were the thread that unraveled it." I smiled, smoothing my moustache. "The tapestry is not undone, Hastings. It is simply rewoven. Greystone's family bonds have been tested, but the new patterns will be stronger for having withstood the strain." I settled back in my seat, the carriage rolling steadily along the country lane. As we passed beneath arching elms, I reflected on the final moments in the moonlit library, the hidden passage, the torn diary pages, and the solitary figure who believed himself invisible. In that convergence of secrecy and revelation, justice had prevailed, not through brute force, but through the patient application of reason. The gentle hum of the horses and the rhythmic click of the carriage wheels lulled us into a contemplative silence. Beyond the hedgerows, fields of wheat swayed in the breeze, their golden heads bowed reverently to the morning sun. The world felt expansive, full of possibility, as though every whisper carried the promise of a new secret waiting to be unveiled. I turned to Hastings with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Hastings, one might believe that the greatest mysteries lie in distant lands or in the grand affairs of state. Yet often they hide in familiar places, in the quiet corridors of a family home, in the whispered fears of those we hold dear." Hastings met my gaze. "Yes, it is humbling to realize that villainy and virtue dwell side by side in the most unassuming hearts." I tapped my temple lightly. And therein lies the triumph of the little grey cells, to see beyond appearances, to detect the subtle tremors of motive, and to restore balance where chaos once reigned. The carriage turned onto a broader road, leading us away from the Ellinghams toward London. The landscape shifted from manicured lawns to rolling countryside dotted with grazing sheep. Sunlight danced upon hedgerows, and birdsong filled the air, a joyous chorus celebrating the new day. At last, the silhouette of my lodgings appeared on the horizon, a modest townhouse nestled among others of its kind. The coach slowed, and the coachman guided us to the curb. Before I could disembark, Hastings spoke. "Poirot, when do you think the next call will come?" I paused, fingering the envelope containing Miss Montague's final diary entries. "Very soon, Hastings. The world is rife with unsolved puzzles, each a whisper begging to be heard." I rose and offered my hand to Hastings. "And when that whisper reaches us, mon ami, we shall be ready." With that, I stepped down from the carriage onto the smooth pavement, cane in hand, flanked by my faithful companion. As the carriage rolled away, I watched its retreating form until it vanished around the bend. Then, turning toward the bustling street, I took a measured breath and strode forward into the day, mind alight with possibility and heart content in the knowledge that, wherever whispers led, justice and reason shall follow. Chapter 11. Reflections in Departure. A fortnight had passed since the turbulent events at Greystone Manor, yet the echo of its whispered corridors remained vivid in my memory. On a crisp autumn morning, I found myself once more traversing the streets of London, my footsteps guided by both habit and the faint expectation of a new inquiry. Captain Hastings accompanied me, his gait measured but alert, as though every lamp-post and carriage wheel might conceal a clue. We paused before a modest bookstall near Charing Cross, and Hastings purchased a paper while I allowed my thoughts to settle. "Mon ami," I began, "our last adventure proved that even the most serene drawing-room can harbour perilous secrets. Have you ever reflected on how closely devotion and danger intertwine?" Hastings folded the paper and tucked it beneath his arm. "Indeed, Poirot. Penrose's obsession, tender yet twisted, reminds us that the heart's motives are as labyrinthine as any secret passage." He tilted his head thoughtfully. "Do you suppose Lady Ellingham and her family have found peace at last?" I smiled faintly. "Time will tell. Trust, once fragmented, demands nurturing. I suspect the roses in their garden, replanted and tended by Clara's own hands, will bloom as tokens of renewal, rather than reminders of fear." I paused, adjusting my bowler hat. "But tell me, Hastings, does the everyday bustle of this city not pall against the quiet intensity of Greystone's mysteries?" He chuckled softly. "Perhaps. Yet every street holds its own story. The baker who rises before dawn, the maid who sweeps cobbled lanes, the merchant whose ledger conceals more than just sums." His eyes sparkled. "In a sense, urban life presents its own tapestry of motives and misdirection." I nodded in agreement. True. The little grey cells must remain vigilant, even when the threat seems distant. A whisper today may lead to a crime tomorrow. I tapped my temple for emphasis. One must always be prepared to discern the faintest tremor of guilt among the chorus of innocence. We resumed our walk, passing a grand theatre advertising an upcoming drama. Hastings paused to admire the poster. "Speaking of dramas, perhaps I shall attend tonight's performance. A change of scene might aid my recuperation after those anxious nights at Greystone." "An excellent choice," I replied. "Drama, after all, provides a controlled environment for human passions to play out, far less dangerous than real life. I allowed myself a rare moment of levity. And if any deception unfolds upon the stage, we need only applaud rather than intervene. We continued toward the Thames embankment, the river glinting beneath a steel-hued sky. I inhaled the brisk air, feeling the city's pulse around me. "Hastings," I said, "do you ever envy those who live without suspicion, who see the world in simple colours rather than shades of motive?" He considered the question, glancing at the water's current. "At times," he admitted. "Yet I cannot imagine a life devoid of curiosity. The very act of observation brings purpose. Without it, we might drift aimlessly." I smiled, granting him assent. "And so, we are bound to our calling. Though the world may seem placid, beneath its surface flows the same currents of betrayal, love, and ambition we observed at Greystone. Our task is to illuminate those currents before they become torrents." A sudden cry drew our attention toward a nearby market stall where a pickpocket had been caught in the act. A constable approached, securing the miscreant's arms. Hastings and I watched as the scuffle unfolded, the thief protesting his innocence despite the evidence. The scene struck me as a microcosm of larger crimes, impulse rather than obsession, petty gain rather than mad devotion. Yet the principle remained identical: motive exposed through action. I patted Hastings on the shoulder. "Come, let us leave the petty drama to the yard. Our next case may lie beyond the city, or within its quietest corners." He nodded, adjusting his coat against the chill. "Where to, Poirot?" I closed my eyes momentarily, envisioning the maps and letters awaiting my attention back at my lodging. "I believe a letter arrived this morning. A plea for help from a gentleman in Brighton. He mentions something about a missing heirloom and strange footprints on the beach." My mustache twitched in anticipation. The sea breeze shall provide a refreshing change, and a new puzzle for our little grey cells. Hastings brightened at the prospect. "A seaside mystery. I can almost smell the salt air already." We quickened our pace, turning toward the station. The city's cacophony embraced us: cab horns, hawkers' cries, and the distant rumble of a train departing. Each sound, to my practiced ear, held the possibility of a hidden rhythm, a clue to be deciphered. As we boarded the carriage, I took one last look at London's bustling streets. "And so, Hastings," I murmured, "we leave behind the echoes of Greystone Manor, the whispered corridors and moonlit rendezvous, yet carry forward the wisdom it imparted." I tapped my cane against the carriage seat. "Remember, mon ami, wherever there is affection, concealed passageways await those who seek them. And wherever there are passages, there are secrets yearning to be revealed." He settled opposite me, offering a steadying smile. "Lead on, Poirot. I trust in your little grey cells to guide us safely through the next enigma." With that, the whistle sounded, and the train glided from the platform. We journeyed southward, the urban landscape giving way to rolling fields and seaside villages. As the horizon broadened, I allowed my mind to wander across possibilities: deceptive footprints in sand, anonymous notes carried on the wind, and the familiar thrill of discovery. Yes, the affair of the whispered address had concluded, but our work was far from finished. For every ending there is a beginning, another whisper, another question, another testament to the indomitable power of reason. And with Hastings by my side, I felt certain that no mystery, however slender its thread, would remain unsolved. Chapter 12. The Whisper That Endures. The gentle rhythm of the train lulled me into reverie as the countryside slid by in green and gold. Hastings, ever the attentive companion, dozed lightly beside me, his head tipped toward the window. I held in my hand the final envelope bearing Miss Montague's last diary entries, tokens of courage and compassion that had guided our investigation at Greystone Manor. As the afternoon sun warmed my face, I reflected upon the curious power of a whispered address to both ensnare and liberate. In that manor's hidden corridors, an obsession had flourished, masked by fragrant anise and violet perfume. It was devotion, twisted by rejection, that almost claimed 2 innocent lives. Yet it was also devotion, Clara's fierce loyalty and Beatrice's calculated bravery, that ultimately restored them to safety. Such contrasts reminded me that human motive is rarely one-dimensional. Even a simple invitation can conceal layers of intent. Hastings stirred and opened his eyes, smiling at me. "You look 1,000,000 miles away, Poirot. Plotting our next move?" I returned his smile. "Mon ami, I consider not only our next adventure, but the lessons from our last. True, we chase external criminals, but the greatest mysteries often lie within the human heart." I tapped the envelope thoughtfully. "This diary will live in safe hands, a reminder that courage can be as potent as fear." He stretched and rose, straightening his coat. "And what of Brighton? The missing heirloom and footprints in the sand await their little grey cells." I inclined my head. "Indeed. Yet first, let us honour the resolution of the affair of the whispered address. The Ellingham's home, once a haven of secrets, now stands as a testament to their resilience. I suspect that when next we pass through those gates, we shall hear only laughter echoing through the corridors." A distant whistle announced our approach to Brighton Station. We gathered our belongings, the envelope safely stowed in my case. As we stepped onto the platform, the sea breeze greeted us with a tang of salt and possibility. Seagulls dipped overhead, their cries punctuating the arrival of a new chapter. We made our way toward the waiting carriage, the station mistress curtsying in welcome. Yet, even as city gave way to seaside charm, my mind circled back to the whispered lore of hidden passages and midnight rendezvous. Mystery, I knew, would find us just as surely on the sands of Brighton as in the drawing rooms of Mayfair. Moments later, we rolled along the coast road, the railway track glinting beside us. Hastings looked out at the wide expanse of water. "The sea," he mused, "has its own secrets, shipwrecks, smuggled cargo, lost messages in bottles." I nodded, tapping my cane against the carriage rail. And like the corridors at Greystone, the ocean holds hidden currents. Our task is to discern the true flow beneath the surface, whether in wave or whisper, in fog-shrouded beach, or in the hushed fear of a family home. As the coastline unfurled before us, pier, promenades, and elegant hotels, I allowed a moment's satisfaction. The case behind us had tested every subtlety of observation and deduction. We had seen how the gentlest of voices could both beguile and protect, how hidden passages mirrored the concealed chambers of human desire, and in unravelling that, we had brought justice not only through law, but through compassion. Hastings leaned back, closing his eyes against the sun. "You know, Poirot, I've often thought that the greatest gift we bring to our clients is not merely exposing the culprit, but restoring their faith in one another." "Precisely," I agreed. "For what is justice, if not the re-establishment of trust? A family fractured by fear can be healed when the truth emerges, no matter how softly it was first spoken." The carriage slowed as we entered Brighton's quaint station square. The driver inclined his whip in greeting, and we stepped down into the bustle of holidaymakers and merchants. Yet even here, Among the laughter of the promenaders, I remained vigilant. Every glance, every gesture, might conceal a question waiting to be asked. I turned to Hastings with a final thought. Let us proceed to our lodgings, obtain the gentleman's letter, and examine these seaside footprints. For the affair of the whispered address may be concluded, but the work of the little grey cells is never done. Hastings offered his arm, and together we walked toward the bright lights of the pier. The murmur of the waves accompanied our steps, as though the sea itself whispered its own secrets. And I, Hercule Poirot, welcomed the challenge, ready once more to illuminate the hidden pathways of human motive, wherever they might lead. Chapter 13. Footprints on the Shore. The morning sun glinted upon the restless waters of Brighton's seafront as Captain Hastings and I emerged from our modest lodgings. A crisp breeze carried the tang of salt and seaweed, and the promenade was already alive with early risers, a pair of elderly women knitting beneath striped deck chairs, a vendor arranging his postcards, and children scuffing the sand with wooden toys. All seemed innocuous, yet I knew that beneath the veneer of seaside gaiety lay the subtle tremors of a fresh mystery. We made our way to the hotel's small sitting room, where Mr. Algernon Fairchild, a gentleman of genteel bearing, awaited us. He rose from a wicker chair at our approach, his suit slightly rumpled, his expression a mixture of hope and anxiety. In one hand he clutched an envelope, our promised letter, while with the other he motioned toward the window overlooking the beach. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming so promptly," he began, smoothing his tie. "You see, I inherited from my late uncle a small silver locket, a family heirloom dating to Queen Victoria's reign. I wore it to the West Pier last evening, leaving it upon a bench while I inspected some seaweed specimens. When I returned, it was gone." I inclined my head, signaling him to continue. "I searched immediately for footprints, any sign of disturbance. At dawn, I ventured out again and found these prints in the sand." He handed me a sketch. 2 parallel sets of footprints, one set larger and deeper, the other more delicate and slight. The deeper prints led toward the water's edge. The shallower paired prints veered inland toward the promenade. I studied the sketch thoughtfully. "You say the prints stopped at the high water mark?" Mr. Fairchild nodded. "Yes, monsieur." As though the thief paused, perhaps dropped something, then retraced steps toward the town. Hastings frowned, curious. Why would the lighter prints accompany the deeper ones? A child, perhaps, or someone fleeing in bare feet. "Or misdirection," I said softly. "Someone guiding the trail to suggest an accomplice, drawing focus to an innocent passerby." I tapped a finger to my lips. "Tell me, Mr. Fairchild, did you see anyone near the bench at sunset? Vendor carts, fishermen, a strolling couple?" He pursed his lips. Only one figure, a woman in a dark cloak, stood by the railing gazing at the sea. I thought she might be a tourist, but her stance was too still, too purposeful. "Very well," I replied. "I shall examine the scene myself." I rose, gathering my coat and cane. "Captain Hastings, will you join me on the sands?" Outside, the tide had begun its slow retreat, leaving behind shallow pools and slick strands of kelp. I approached the bench in question, its wrought-iron frame still warm from the rising sun, and knelt to inspect the ground. The sand here was firmer, compacted by countless feet, but at the bench's edge I discerned 2 distinct impressions, one a clear brogue heel, the other a slender barefoot print, heel rounding into delicate toes. "Observe," I said, sketching the prints in my notebook. "The brogue suggests a city gentleman, stiff posture, purposeful stride. The barefoot print is smaller, toes splayed as though the person paused, then advanced slowly. Note how the heel is shallow. She stepped lightly, almost hesitatingly. Hastings knelt beside me. Monsieur, if misdirection was intended, why include the barefoot prints? Would not a single set suffice? Because the true culprit seeks to confuse, not merely to conceal, I explained. By adding a second identity, he invites investigation along two paths, one leading to a hired child or accomplice, the other to a lone gentleman. Meanwhile, the locket changes hands undetected. I rose and surveyed the promenade. The vendor carts and early strollers offered a host of potential suspects. Let us begin at the West Pier kiosk, I directed. The attendant there may recall the cloaked woman or anyone handling a silver locket. We proceeded to the small wooden shack, where a wiry man in a striped apron polished glasses behind the counter. I introduced myself and showed him a photograph Mr. Fairchild had provided of the heirloom. The attendant's eyes widened. "Ah, yes," he said, pointing seaward. I saw a chap in a dark suit near closing time. He looked uneasy, kept glancing over his shoulder. As he left, something glimmered in his hand. Silver, I reckon. "And the woman in the cloak?" I asked. He shrugged. "No idea. She came later, around dusk. Didn't buy nothing. Just stared at the horizon, then disappeared into the crowd." I thanked him and motioned to Hastings. "Two threads, mon ami, the suited man and the silent woman. We must pursue both. But first, let us examine the suit shop on Marine Parade. The cut of the brogue heel and the man's gait suggest bespoke footwear, likely from a local outfitter." Hastings nodded, and we set off along the promenade. As the gulls wheeled above and the waves lapped against the shore, I felt that familiar thrill stir within me, the interplay of deception and deduction, of misdirection and motive. The missing locket might seem a trifling affair compared to midnight kidnappings, yet every mystery, no matter how small, demands the same rigorous application of reason. And so, with the sand still clinging to our soles and the sea breeze at our backs, we embarked upon the next chapter of our journey, following footprints, questioning strangers, and teasing the truth from the whispers that lingered upon the wind. Chapter 14. The Tailor's Secret. The afternoon sun had waned to a soft glow as Captain Hastings and I reached Ross and Finch, the bespoke outfitter on Marine Parade. Its polished window displayed finely cut tweed suits and rows of gleaming brogues. Within, the scent of leather and wool mingled with the faint tang of tobacco from a corner pipe. An elderly gentleman, impeccably dressed in charcoal grey, polished a pair of calfskin shoes behind the counter. He looked up, offering a courteous bow as we entered. "Good day, sirs," he greeted. "Ross at your service." His voice was measured, refined, befitting a man of the cloth. I offered my card. "Monsieur Ross, I seek information regarding a pair of brogues sold recently. A gentleman purchased boots with a distinctive sole pattern, a vine-like motif in the size you see here." I handed him a sketch of the footprint's sole from my notebook. Ross adjusted his pince-nez and studied the drawing. His lips curved into a knowing smile. "Ah, yes, that pattern is exclusive to our bespoke line, the Mariner's Collection. Only 5 pairs in that motif were crafted this season, each custom-fitted. Let me check my ledger." He turned to an ornate wooden shelf and retrieved a slim, leather-bound book. Flipping its pages with care, he located the entry. On the 20th of October, a Mr. Edward Langston commissioned this design. He collected them yesterday afternoon. A private gentleman imported wool from Yorkshire, paid in cash, no questions asked. Ross closed the ledger and fixed me with a thoughtful gaze. Mr. Langston is peculiar. Kept his hat low, never removed his coat, and insisted I package the shoes discreetly. Said he'd return next week for matching waistcoat. A fascinating lead, I murmured. Do you recall anything of his appearance? Stature, accent, mannerisms? Ross nodded slowly. Tall, slender, posture rigid, accented, perhaps Scottish, though not exactly. He spoke little, paid promptly, and seemed uneasy, glancing often toward the window. I exchanged a glance with Hastings. Scotland, interesting. I tapped my cane. Thank you, Monsieur Ross. Your discretion is appreciated. He inclined his head, and I tucked the ledger reference into my coat pocket. Outside, Hastings raised an eyebrow. Langston, you say? Not a name I recognize among Brighton's notables. Yet he owns bespoke brogues, I replied, and his purchase aligns precisely with the footprint pattern. He is our gentleman in the suit. I paused, considering. Now we must discover his connection to the locket and to the cloaked woman who watched the sea. We returned to the promenade, passing clusters of tourists and street performers. The tide had receded further, revealing a stretch of glistening sand. As we walked, I contemplated the lighter barefoot prints. They veered inland toward the bustling arcade. Perhaps the cloaked woman discarded her cloak there, or passed her burden to Langston. Let us proceed to the West Arcade, I suggested, leading the way. Shops of curiosity and novelty, gifts, trinkets, and perhaps second-hand valuables. We entered a narrow passage lined with glass-fronted boutiques. The air inside was cooler, the light dimmer. At the far end, a small stall displayed lockets, cameos, and costume jewelry. The proprietor, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair, dusted a velvet tray. I approached her. Madame, I am investigating a missing silver locket with an ornate Victorian clasp. Might you recall any such piece passing through your hands recently? She peered over her spectacles. Silver lockets? Many come through here, but I did have one this week. A reproduction, they said, but elegantly made. Came with a cloak and the buyer paid in coin, no questions. Can you describe the buyer? Asked Hastings. The woman nodded. Tall, dark cloak, though I saw no boots, but he lingered, fingering the clasp, before handing it to a small figure, a girl in bare feet clutching a satchel. I felt a thrill. A child, barefoot on the sand. The thinner prints match her steps. Did you observe where she went? She darted out quickly, toward the pier. The woman frowned. There was something wary in her glance. She seemed afraid of someone watching. I exchanged another glance with Hastings, then stepped back into the arcade's muted light. Our cloak-and-dagger woman may be a child accomplice or a pawn. Her presence orchestrated to confuse, as suspected. Then our next step, Hastings prompted. I tapped my chin. We locate Mr. Langston's lodgings. The ledger lists his address, the Seaview, Clifton Road. Brighton being generous with names, but let us call on this gentleman and observe his reaction to our inquiries. Together, we emerged onto a side street where white stucco houses faced the sea. At number 12, the Seaview stood, its windows shuttered against the afternoon glare. I knocked once, twice. No answer. I peered through the glass. An empty sitting room, the carpet disturbed, boot prints on the rug. I turned to Hastings. He fled through another exit, perhaps toward the cloaked woman waiting at the pier. This is no innocent gentleman. He frowned. But why target a locket, sentimental value, or something concealed within? Precisely, I agreed. The heirloom may hold more than a portrait, perhaps a hidden compartment, a secret note, a map. We must discover what Mr. Langston sought. I pressed my palm to the door's wood. Soon, Hastings, we shall chase whispers along these lanes until we reveal what lies within that silver clasp. The sea's distant roar echoed in our ears as we turned back toward the promenade, determination set upon our faces. The mystery deepened, and the next reveal would hinge on uncovering the tailor's client and the child who walked barefoot upon the sands of Brighton. Chapter 15. The Pursuit Along the Pier. The fading light of late afternoon lent a golden glow to Brighton's West Pier as Captain Hastings and I hurried its length, following the trail left by Mr. Langston and his mysterious barefoot companion. The creaking timbers and scattering of planks beneath our feet lent urgency to every step. I paused mid-span, lifting my cane to examine a faint smear of sand upon the weathered wood, a remnant of our quarry's hurried flight. "Observe, Hastings," I said softly. "These grains have lodged in the grain of the timber. A careful examination will reveal their source." Leaping lightly over a broken board, I knelt and traced the sand into a narrow gap, then held my pocket lens to it. This is coarse beach sand, mingled with fine particles of chalk, likely swept from the cliffs beyond Brighton. Our suspect passed this way, coming from the shore, not the promenade. Hastings peered over my shoulder, so Langston doubled back to the pier to avoid the Clifton Road exit. But why lead us in circles? "Precisely to divert suspicion," I answered, standing. "Yet even the most elaborate ruse cannot withstand a steady pursuit of logic. Now, Hastings, split your path. You circle via the east side of the pier. I will advance along this rail toward the pavilion. We shall close in from both flanks." He nodded, and we separated, each moving with deliberate stealth. I advanced beneath the pavilion's ornate ironwork, scanning shadows for signs of our quarry or the cloaked child. A distant throng gathered around a street musician whose haunting violin notes drifted across the deck. I paused, listening both to melody and to the hush that followed the musician's bow, an artful silence that masked more than applause. Stepping aside, I approached the performer, a gaunt man with sunken cheeks. "Monsieur," I said, producing my card, "did you observe a tall gentleman and a barefoot child pass your corner of the pier this evening?" The musician's eyes darted. "Aye, I did. The man walked brisk, cloak flapping. The child followed barefoot, clutching a small bundle. They paused near the fish stall before vanishing toward the pavilion entrance." "Thank you," I replied, tucking the card away. I moved on, following the wooden whirl of footsteps and muted conversations. The pavilion's arched entrance loomed ahead, its interior dim except for shafts of sunset slanting through dusty panes. Inside, Hastings stood beside a closed door marked "Staff Only." He tapped there, listening. I joined him, and together we heard a faint rustle from within. Hastings exchanged a glance with me, then nodded. "With my permission, mon ami," I whispered. He leaned close to the lock and deftly picked it with the tip of my cane, a trick I had honed in earlier cases. The door gave way with a soft click. Within lay a narrow storeroom stacked with empty crates and fishing nets. In one corner, curled upon a coil of rope, sat the barefoot child, no more than 10 years old, with wide, frightened eyes. Clutched in her small hands was a silver locket, its clasp stained by salt and sand. "Shh, fear not," I murmured, kneeling gently before her. She trembled, but did not flee. "Where is Mr. Langston?" She looked up, tears brimming. I don't know, monsieur," He said we must hide until it was safe, then meet on the cliffs, but I was cold and tired, so I waited here. Her voice quavered. Please don't let him find me. I exchanged a look with Hastings. You are safe now, Hastings assured her, offering a reassuring smile. But we must return this locket to its owner. The child hesitated, then uncapped the locket's clasp. Inside the delicate frame lay not a portrait, but a folded slip of parchment edged in violet ink, the very tincture of Dr. Penrose's perfume. I retrieved the note with care. It bore a crudely drawn map of the beach and cliffs, marked by an X. Look here, Hastings, I said. Our tailor's client sought not the locket's sentiment, but its secret. I smoothed the paper open. This map leads to the cavern beneath White Cliff. There lies our missing heirloom and perhaps the motive for its theft. Hastings frowned. A hidden compartment within the locket, perhaps. A key or cipher to be used in the cavern? Exactly, I replied. Mr. Langston intended to swap the locket's innocent appearance for a clandestine tool, likely of great value. I looked back at the trembling child. And you, mademoiselle, unwittingly carried this map to mislead us. She nodded, sniffing back tears. I never meant harm. He said it would keep me safe. I patted her hand gently. Bravery comes in many forms. You have helped us more than you know. Turning to Hastings, I said, We must investigate the cavern at first light, but tonight we ensure this child's safety and prepare for the ascent to White Cliff. The final piece of our puzzle awaits. Carefully, we lifted the child to her feet and guided her from the storeroom. As we emerged into the dying light of the pier, the sea breeze stirred the salt water in our hair. I folded the map into my pocket and straightened my bowler. Mon ami, I said to Hastings, the whispers have led us to the cliffside passages beneath chalk and stone. In those hidden depths lies the true revelation of this locket's secret, one that binds tailor, thief, and unwitting accomplice alike. Hastings offered his arm in support. Then let us return the child to the inn and rest. Tomorrow we chase the final echo of the whispered address. Together we retraced our steps along the pier, each creak of timber echoing the promise of the mystery yet to be unveiled. Chapter 16. Descent into the Chalk Caverns. At first light, Captain Hastings and I made our way along the narrow coastal path toward White Cliff, the sea's roar echoing below. The air was fresh with salt spray, yet tinged by the chalk dust kicked up beneath our boots. In my pocket lay the penciled map rescued from the barefoot child, a sketch of hidden steps winding beneath the cliff face to a concealed chamber. With each pace, my anticipation grew. The final act of this seaside mystery awaited within those subterranean depths. We reached the cliff's edge where a narrow gully carved its way downward. A rusty iron rung, half buried in flaking chalk, marked the entrance. I paused, inhaling deeply. Mon ami, note how nature conceals its secrets in plain sight. The casual passerby sees only crumbling stone. We see the doorway to truth. Hastings nodded soberly as I secured a small lantern to my belt. I led the descent, pressing my hand against the chalk wall for support. The rungs ended abruptly above a slim ledge. Below, the gully narrowed, its mouth shadowed by an overhanging outcrop. I swept the lantern's beam into the darkness and saw carved steps winding inward. This stair was hewn by human hand, I observed, likely by one who knew its purpose intimately. Hastings followed, voice low. Do you think Langston discovered this passage in our absence? Indeed, I replied. He studied familial lore of coastal smugglers, knowledge passed down through his uncle's letters. He used the locket's hidden map to navigate these cliffs in search of something beyond mere heirloom. We reached a landing where waves thundered below, their roar muted by the stone. Here, the steps forked, one branch rising toward daylight, the other plunging deeper, narrowing to a crawl. I consulted the map. The path sank to a chamber marked with an X. "This way," I said, ducking beneath a low arch. Within moments, the passage widened into a vault-like grotto. Chalk walls gleamed white in the lantern's glow, streaked with mineral veins. At its center stood a rough-hewn pedestal of natural stone, atop which rested an old wooden chest bound in iron straps. The air here was cool and still, as though time itself paused at the threshold. Hastings exhaled. "The chest. There lies our locket's true purpose." I approached the pedestal, mind attuned to every detail. Around its base the floor was scuffed, as if many boots had turned in circles before resting here. I knelt and traced a boot mark, brogue heel with the vine motif. "Langston stood upon this spot," I murmured, matching the footprint we found on the sand. I lifted the lid with my cane's hook. Inside lay a collection of small artifacts, a sheaf of aged letters tied with violet ribbon, a tarnished key of silver, and, in the velvet lining, a compartment carved precisely to fit the missing locket. The clasp's secret hinge must have held the key. I retrieved it and inserted the key into a hidden lock in the chest's base. With a soft click, a false bottom slid aside, revealing a leather-bound journal stamped with the initials E.L. Hastings caught his breath. Edward Langston's journal. I opened the cover, reading the first entry aloud. "I have long sought proof of my uncle's transgressions, embezzlement from the railway company. Within this locket lie ledgers and confessions he hid here before his untimely death. I must recover them to clear my family name." I looked up. Langston believed the locket contained tangible evidence against his forebear. He used the map, secreted in the diary, to retrieve that proof. When the heirloom vanished, he panicked, sought to mislead suspicion with prints and accomplices. Hastings frowned. "But why involve the child? Why risk her safety?" "Because desperate men bribe whatever resource they can," I said grimly. He offered the girl shelter and coin to aid his deception. When she faltered, he abandoned her here. I closed the journal carefully and replaced it in the chest. Yet his scheme collapsed under its own complexity. We heard a sudden shuffle above, stones falling in the upper passage. A muffled footstep echoed. I motioned to Hastings to hold the lantern low. "He returns," I whispered. "Langston must realize someone has discovered his secret." We stepped back into the penumbra as a figure emerged at the stair's mouth. A tall man in a dark overcoat, face drawn with alarm. He clutched a lantern of his own. At the sight of us, his eyes widened. "Monsieur Poirot," he stammered, voice hoarse. I can explain." I advanced, lantern steady. "Indeed, Edward Langston. You retrieved these ledgers to vindicate your uncle, yet your methods imperiled others. Now we stand upon the edge of your confession. Who will speak first, the evidence in this chest or your own words?" Langston glanced at the open journal, then at the locket in my hand. His shoulders sagged. "I only sought the truth," he whispered. "But I never meant to harm the child." Hastings moved to one side, summoning calm. "Return the child to safety, Poirot," he urged. I nodded and pocketed the locket and ledger. "Mr. Langston, you will accompany us back to the inn, where Inspector Japp has been summoned. The evidence is clear: the locket, the journal, and your own footprints. Justice will follow, tempered by the motives of blood and legacy. Langston exhaled, surrender in his eyes. Very well. As we guided him upward through the chalk passage, the morning light filtered down to meet us. The roar of the sea grew louder, as though proclaiming the end of one chapter and the start of another. Above, the world awaited, a realm of accountability, of truth laid bare, and of secrets finally given voice. And as we stepped into the fresh air, I reflected on how a single whispered address and the map it concealed had led us from whispered fears to a revelation written in stone. Chapter 17. Reckoning at Dawn. The inn parlour was quiet as dawn's first light filtered through lace curtains, illuminating the small gathering around the hearth. Inspector Japp sat in a straight-backed chair, his expression grave yet attentive, as I laid the volume of Edward Langston's journal and the silver locket on the low table. Captain Hastings stood beside me, arms folded, while Langston himself, pale and contrite, stood before the inspector. "Inspector," I began, "you have before you the means of this gentleman's misguided enterprise, evidence that he believed would vindicate his late uncle from accusations of embezzlement." I tapped the locket. Within its secret compartment lay the key to the chest beneath White Cliff. Yet in the pursuit of truth, Mr. Langston endangered innocent lives, Clara's child, the maid, and indeed himself. Japp nodded. "Indeed, Poirot. The law must consider both motive and misdeed. A confession coupled with the recovered journal will determine his fate." He opened the journal to the first entry, reading aloud passages that detailed Langston's family pride, his father's broken health, and the shame he feared would tarnish their name. As the inspector spoke, Langston's shoulders sagged, the weight of his inheritance laid bare. At length, Japp closed the journal and rose. "Mr. Langston, your intent to clear your uncle's reputation is understandable. Yet your methods, abduction, deception, endangerment, constitute serious offences. You will accompany me to the magistrate, who will decide whether to show leniency in view of your motives." Langston bowed his head. "I accept whatever judgment the court deems just." I stepped forward. "May I ask a final question, monsieur?" Langston lifted his eyes. "Did you find in your uncle's writings any true exoneration? Was he, in fact, innocent?" Langston hesitated. No. The entries I discovered spoke only of regret and a confession of guilt. He admitted embezzling funds and fled these cliffs in shame. I sought to bring that truth to light, believing the family could move forward honestly, yet I never imagined the cost." A hush fell. Japp exchanged a glance with Hastings and me. "Then the evidence confirms both sorrow and contrition," he said at last. "Your uncle's name remains blemished, but your own actions have rebuked the tradition of silence." He looked at Langston kindly. "There may be virtue in truth, but folly in its pursuit without regard for others." Sir Reginald Ellingham, who had arrived by special messenger bearing Clara's guardianship, spoke from the doorway. "Inspector, I wish to speak on behalf of Mr. Langston. Though his actions endangered lives, his cause was noble and born of love for his family." He stepped forward, removing his hat. "If mercy may temper justice, may it do so now." Lady Ellingham and Clara followed, each offering a quiet nod of sympathy. The memory of their own recent trauma lent their plea great weight. Japp regarded them thoughtfully, then turned back to Langston. "Very well," he pronounced. "I shall recommend to the magistrate that, in view of the circumstances, the rescued child, the thwarted abductions, and the gentleman's own confession, this matter be dealt with a summons, rather than imprisonment. He will make amends in community service, aiding in local rescue efforts. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Langston's shoulders eased as gratitude and remorse wove together on his face. He bowed deeply. "Thank you, Inspector. I shall accept any penance to prove myself worthy." I stepped aside, speaking softly to Hastings. Justice tempered by compassion, another triumph of the little grey cells. Hastings nodded, satisfaction shining in his eyes. As the inspector departed with Langston to arrange the formalities, the Ellinghams and I remained behind. Lady Ellingham approached me, her hand gently clasping the recovered locket. "Monsieur Poirot, you have shown us that even the most tangled secrets can be unravelled, and that mercy is as precious as truth." I inclined my head. "Madame, it is the task of the detective not merely to expose guilt, but to restore balance, to see that justice and charity walk hand in hand." I allowed a small smile. Now that this seaside mystery is laid to rest, I trust Brighton will return to its cheerful bustle, its pier and sands no longer tainted by deception. Clara, standing beside her cousin's rescued child, placed the locket around the little girl's neck. The heirloom swung against her frock, a symbol no longer of intrigue but of forgiveness and new beginnings. I gathered my cane and turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, our work here is done. Shall we return to London, or does another whisper beckon you from these Brighton lanes?" Hastings straightened his coat with an exuberant grin. "London may wait. There is a charm to these cliffs and promenades, yet I suspect the next ripple of mystery calls us homeward." I nodded, smoothing my moustache. "Then homeward it shall be, Hastings. For in every port and in every drawing-room whispers persist, and the little grey cells must listen." With farewells exchanged, we stepped onto the dew-kissed lawn outside the inn, Brighton's sunrise painting the sky in rose and gold. Behind us lay the chalk caverns, the hidden chest, and a case solved by reason tempered with compassion. Ahead lay the open road, and the promise of the next adventure waiting in the hush between one mystery and the next. Chapter 18. Whispers Fading. The carriage snaked its way out of Brighton as the sun climbed toward its zenith, painting the coastline in hues of pearl and aquamarine. Captain Hastings sat opposite me, his gaze drifting to the rolling waves that still carried the echo of our seaside adventure. Behind us lay the promise of restored peace for the Ellinghams, the redemption of Edward Langston, and the safe return of a child once lost to fear. Before us stretched the familiar road to London, and the hush of mysteries yet untold. I leaned back, allowing the rhythm of the wheels to soothe my mind. "Mon ami," I began, smoothing my moustache, "we have witnessed the full cycle of human motive, from devotion warped by secrecy to courage that triumphs over deception." I tapped my cane upon the floor of the carriage. Our task was not merely to find missing persons or stolen heirlooms, but to restore trust where it had been fractured. Hastings nodded, folding his hands in his lap. "The Ellinghams will rebuild their home upon a firmer foundation, one that knows both the sweetness of family bonds and the cautionary note of whispered warnings." He paused, glancing at the envelope containing Langston's journal. "And Mr. Langston, though tried by his own zeal, leaves Brighton with a chance to rebuild his reputation honestly." I smiled. "Yes. His penance will be harsh, yet tempered by compassion. He has paid the price not only in confession, but in the relief of those he endangered. Such is the balance of justice." I turned my gaze to the window, where dune grasses bent in the breeze. And in that balance lies hope. That truth, once revealed, can heal as much as it can hurt. A thoughtful silence settled between us until Hastings spoke again. Poirot, do you ever wonder whether we chase the right mysteries, the ones that matter most? I considered this, watching a fishing boat cut a white wake across the horizon. Every case we pursue tests the capacities of reason and compassion, I replied. For a detective must not only unveil disguise, but also guide emotions back to harmony. The greatest mystery, perhaps, is the human heart itself, its capacity for both folly and forgiveness. Hastings inclined his head appreciatively. Then let us be ever vigilant, ready to listen for whispers in every corner, whether in grand estates or humble seaside inns. As the spire of St. James's Church appeared in the distance, I straightened my bowler. Indeed, Hastings, for wherever affection tugs at the soul, there lies the potential for secrets, and the duty of the little grey cells to illuminate them. We arrived at my lodgings on Baker Street as the carriage came to a halt. Stepping onto the sidewalk, I felt the familiar pulse of London's streets, a tapestry of lives interwoven with hopes, fears, and the inevitable mysteries they conceal. We paid the coachman and watched the carriage depart, its heels clicking away until it vanished around the corner. Hastings glanced at the envelope once more. Shall we deliver this to Inspector Japp? I nodded. Yes, and afterward let us retire to our usual haunt for a pipe and a glass of cognac. The affair of the whispered address and the Brighton enigma have taught us much about the fragile interplay of motive and method. I paused, offering my arm. Come, mon ami, for justice and reflection both call us forward. Down the street I met Inspector Japp, exiting the yard, ledger in hand. He raised an eyebrow in greeting. Poirot, your correspondence never fails to intrigue. What have you for me today? I handed him the journal and locket. Evidence complete, Inspector, and a recommendation for leniency, where intent and outcome speak volumes. Japp flipped through the pages, then closed the journal with a decisive tap. Very well, I shall present it to the magistrate at once. He pocketed the locket. You have once again demonstrated that the finest detective work combines observation with humanity. I inclined my head. Merci, Inspector. Until the next whisper demands our attention. Turning away, I led Hastings toward our chosen tavern, the smell of roast and the hum of conversation spilling into the street. As we crossed the threshold, the warmth of hearth and companionship beckoned, a fitting close to our latest journey. Seated in a quiet corner, pipe alight and cognac decanted, I allowed myself a moment's repose. Hastings across from me, regaled by the memory of cobbled sands and hidden passages, raised his glass. To the little grey cells, he toasted. I clinked my glass against his. To reason, compassion, and the whispers that guide us, may they ever lead to justice. And so, with the final echoes of Brighton's mystery behind us, we savoured the calm after the storm, ready for whatever murmur in the shadows might next call upon our greatest gifts, observation, deduction, and the unerring conviction that, in the end, truth will prevail.